Ryumen Sukuna, the 1,000-year-old cursed spirit who is better known as the king of curses and an indisputable threat to the Jujutsu world. Despite being the final boss of the story, most of Sukuna's existence is an enigma, even his origins and how many curse techniques he actually has. Just like Satoru freaking Gojo, who has Limitless and the 6 eyes, Sukuna's display of the fire technique against Jogo in the Shibuya arc solidified the fact that Sukuna also has multiple techniques, and thus began the flurry of theories. No, but seriously, everyone has their own theory on Sukuna. Some say he has 20 techniques, some say he has stored his techniques in his tattoos, some say he eats people to absorb any technique he wants, some say, well, you get it. Even still, we haven't arrived at a satisfactory answer to one of the biggest mysteries in JUJUTSU Kaisen. That is until now. A member of the JUJUTSU Kaisen community, user Spaghetti789 on the Jujutsushi subreddit, might have just solved this burning question with a theory based on Sukuna's weapons and true form. That's right, everyone. It's time to go deep into Jujutsu Kaisen and discuss Sukuna's last curse technique. Yes, you heard that right. Sukuna most possibly has only one curse technique left to unveil, and it's related to thunder. The answer is rooted in mythology and Sukuna's lore. So without any further ado, let's begin. It's already common knowledge by now that Sukuna's character is based on Ryumen Sukuna from the Japanese mythology that one can find in the Nihon Shoki. People who have pressed the bell icon for our channel are already aware of how the living Sukuna in real life was the inspiration for Jujutsu Kaisen from this video. And if you don't recognize this video, don't be a silly willy. Make sure to press the like button and make sure to hit the notification bells to make sure you are on the same page as the rest of the community. So, in this video, let's focus on Sukuna's weapons as depicted in the Nihon Shoki. Sukuna from the Nihon Shoki was said to wield 2 swords and 2 bows and arrows with his 4 hands. Gege Akutami certainly incorporated these elements into JJK Sukuna, as his weapons appear along with his true form on the cover of chapter 117. Now, we can't see 2 swords in the image, but we do see a blade connected to the ball dagger weapon in Sukuna's left hand. We can safely assume the blade corresponds to the swords and thus refers to cleave and dismantle, the 2 invisible cutting and slashing techniques that we've seen Sukuna use plenty of times in the story. It is Sukuna's go-to technique that can't be easily avoided by anyone. Even during the Shibuya incident, Sukuna used cleave and dismantle against General Maharaga in his domain expansion. So the swords from Sukuna's arsenal of weapons really do check out. And instead of swords, we see 2 odd weapons in Sukuna's hands, and both of them involve Hindu mythology. More specifically speaking, Sukuna's weapons are inspired by the Hindu deity Lord Shiva. In Sukuna's right hand is a weapon called a trishul or a trident, a weapon that Lord Shiva is said to wield. Once again, we have to go back to the Shibuya incident fight between Sukuna and Jogo. In this fight, we come to know a frightening thing. Sukuna may even be capable of copying other people's techniques. In chapter 116, Jogo and Sukuna's fight was in its last phase, since even Jogo's maximum attack meteor didn't so much as even graze Sukuna. However, this attack did impress the King of Curses, who decided to fight Jogo using fire itself. This was a trump card that even Sukuna said Jogo wouldn't know as he began to conjure flames. Even though, if you think about it, Jogo was supposed to be the master of fire. And if you look at the stance Sukuna has whilst launching the attack, you can see that it actually resembles the stance of using a bow and arrow. This leads us to believe that the fire technique corresponds to one of the bows from the ancient Sukuna, making it clear that Sukuna has 3 techniques if we count cleave and dismantle as different from each other. So you're probably wondering, ABD, wait a second, what's the catch? Well, the Trishul or trident that Shiva wields is said to be an extremely divine weapon. There are a couple of tales regarding its origins, but the following is important to know. One story says that Shiva's wife was dissatisfied due to the sun's unbearable heat. To cull the heat by 1/8, the sun, also called Surya, underwent grinding and some matter fell on earth. This same burning matter of the sun created the Trishul, which can explain why its attacks are to be feared. There's another legend about Shiva that concerns an attack called Pashupatra. In this story, Shiva had to destroy 3 evil demon cities flowing in the sky called Tripura. For this purpose, he made the Pashupatra by combining several components of different gods and goddesses and even the universe itself. Everything that was involved in the attack, the chariot, the charioteer, the bowstring, the wheels and so on, were made of divine components. But our main focus is that when Lord Shiva launched the Pashupatra attack on Tripura, it took on the form of a fire arrow. The arrow itself was made from the essence of another Hindu deity, Vishnu, who is known as the Lord of the Lords. This arrow burned down the 3 cities to ashes and was much like a mythological nuke. It seems, oddly familiar to how Sukuna burned down Jogo with a fire arrow and a meteor. We can see in this panel that Jogo is literally burning. He is meant to be a volcano curse, so fire in any form wasn't supposed to hurt him at all. He was supposed to be immune to burns, right? But looking at the 2 stories about the origins of Sukuna's fire curse technique, we can say that Jogo lost because he was against a divine force itself.
Oh my god!
And we already know that when it comes to Sukuna, the king of curses, the concept of divinity and enlightenment, they go hand in hand. If you have watched my previous video that explains why Satra, Gojo and Sukuna are enlightened gods pretty much in the sorcery world, this will make a lot of sense. But one instance of Sukuna's divinity is his domain expansion. When he casts Malevolent Shrine in chapter 119, we come to know that it is much different from other domains. Sukuna doesn't use a barrier to realize his innate domain, which makes it not like an artist painting on a canvas, but an artist painting a masterpiece on air instead. But also, more importantly, a divine technique. If this theory holds true, Jogo couldn't have gone against the force of Sukuna's fire at all. Another very cool thing to note here is that the true form of Sukuna also resembles Lord Shiva's form with 4 arms. Well, you're probably wondering, okay ABD, that explains the trident and 1 bow from the Nihon Shoki, so what about the last weapon that represents the 2nd bow? Well, according to Spaghetti's theory, the ball dagger weapon in Sukuna's right hand actually resembles his thunder arrow, and thus a technique related to thunder. This last weapon can also be found in Hindu mythology and is called a Vajra. The Vajra belongs to another Hindu deity who is the king of gods, Indra. It also translates to thunderbolt, which makes sense because Indra is also the god of thunder. Just like Shiva, Indra is also known to wield a bow and arrow, which is called Indra Dhanush. That is also what a rainbow is called, because it is said that Indra's bow looks like an actual rainbow's arch. The sound when an arrow is released from this bow is also said to be so powerful that it can produce reverberation like charged clouds rumbling. The bow and arrow cause terrible fear in enemies by blinding them when they produce flashes of light. that are as brilliant as lightning. In fact, Indra also wields actual lightning as his arrows, which is why the weapon is called a thunderbolt or Vajra. Yes, the same weapon that Sukuna seems to be wielding in his true form. So the last technique that Sukuna may have up his sleeve is a lightning or thunder arrow, much like the fire one. And looking at the mythological reference behind it, we can say that it will be an extremely powerful attack. If we have to summarize this theory, we can see that all of Sukuna's techniques are presented together in chapter 117's cover as a foreshadowing, as it's linked to the Nihon Shoki of Sukuna. The blade and the two swords correspond to cleave and dismantle. One of the bows and the trident represent the fire technique, and lastly the second bow and the Vajra refer to Sukuna's eventual lightning technique we are yet to see. Much like Malevolent Shrine, it's clear that Sukuna's other two techniques also have divine origin, and that is why he is enlightened. It's also a major question now whether Sukuna will have two more domain expansions based on his fire and lightning techniques. To substantiate this theory, we might just have missed a massive foreshadowing back in chapter 12. The anime changed Itadori and Satoru Gojo's conversation about cursed techniques to incorporate pop culture references like the Kamehameha, but the manga shed some more light on the theory. In this panel, we see Itadori whining about the fact that he thought he could use fire or thunder, and Gojo, he thinks to himself that Itadori just can't use it now but will eventually. It's too much of a coincidence that Sukuna is later revealed to have a fire technique that he says Jogo might not know, telling us that the second half of Itadori's dialogue might also hold some weight. This reveal might seriously make Sukuna even more broken than he already is, since he can use a surprise card anytime in a crucial fight against tough opponents. There is a chance that the past few latest chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen is just building up a great fight later because of Kishimo. It's important to think about this because Kishimo's lightning curse technique has been an insane addition to the Culling game so far. Using this technique, he even critically injured Hakairi, who was supposed to be immortal for 4 minutes 11 seconds in chapter 188. His method of fighting is quite feisty because he has a unique curse trait of electricity to his curse energy. There are even theories that say that Kishimo has forsaken his curse technique to have an OP form of fighting with his curse power. If that's the case, then it would be a whole new twist to the power system of Jujutsu Kaisen. Looking at his past, it seems that Kishimo was in search of an opponent who would truly challenge him, and to be honest, his pair up with Sukuna makes even more sense now. It would be interesting if Sukuna pulls the same act as he did with Jogo and fights Kishimo with his own speciality, and we wonder if that's the very reason Kishimo's character is being built up, because Sukuna actually has perfected a divine form of the lightning technique. Kenjaku nudged Kishimo in this direction, as well as hinting to him that he should fight Sukuna. In fact, we could even see Kishimo trying to prove his technique is superior against Sukuna, but obviously he will end up losing. But this also makes us wonder if Satoru Gojo has known about the fire and thunder techniques all along, since the panel of chapter 12 being a hint. Does Satoru freaking Gojo have a plan to counter these techniques? If he's so confident about beating 20 Finger Sukuna, Gojo has to have a contingency plan. In any other case, Satoru Gojo might really have a hard time defeating Sukuna, because Gojo's techniques are out in the open, but he doesn't know anything about Sukuna's. Gojo may have underestimated his true power, since nobody in the story has figured it out, and Kenjaku declared in chapter 187, after 600 years of existence planning the Culling games thus far, he still hasn't found any sorcerer stronger than Sukuna. Satoru Gojo was of course born, and his opinion may have changed in the year 2018, and that's why he sealed him away on October 31st. Everything that I'm saying goes back to our discussion on how Sukuna is an enlightened sorcerer. We can say that understanding the core of curse energy is what makes you enlightened. Sukuna clearly has obtained it during his life, where he evolved to have 4 arms and 2 faces. It totally makes sense that all his techniques are divine to suit his nature as a dominating force. Similarly, Sasuro Gojo is also linked to Buddhism as Buddha himself, using his quote as the honored one. This means it will be a true battle of two seemingly entitled beings that are the strongest forces of Jujutsu Kaisen, and perhaps the one to win will be the only one to be actually enlightened. So to fully understand this concept of enlightenment, since you're pretty much lost I'm guessing, go watch this video being displayed to you right now.